Hello and happy Labor Day. It is Labor Day 2024. So I wanted to give everybody a little bit of an update on the polling situation because the polls have finally caught up to the back end of the DNC, and the rest of like the polls that were kind of coming out were not like the what they call A plus polling. It was kind of like supplemental polling, and then the first one that came out was from, ironically, Fox News, and it didn't show them exactly what they wanted to see. So that was kind of fun. But I just wanted to take a real quick look at how the polls are going and just go from there. So let's take a look, shall we?
Back to today's video. Today is Sunday, September 1st, 2024. Happy September and happy 65 days until the November 5th, 2024 presidential election. We are 65 days out, 2 months out from the general election, and today I'm going to be showing you my update.
Oh, man. We're a month and 2 months and 5 days out. Yeah.
2024 election prediction between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump.
4 days.
Today we're taking a look at an electoral map that really has changed dramatically over the past year, fluctuating between a Democratic and Republican victory, especially with two different candidates for president on the Democratic side, with Joe Biden up until July.
I still cannot believe that this race is as close as it is. Donald Trump is sitting there flailing, saying all the wrong things to every like little subsect that he has, even in his own support, he's losing. So, like in Florida, the what was it, the Moms for Liberty or the anti-abortion crew? Yeah, he pissed them off. So it's kind of fun to see that happen, but it's also kind of strangely disconcerting where I have to still see the polls be so close, even though he's losing so much support. And then the Democrats are gaining so much support. It's like the narratives and the polls don't line up.
July 21st, and now Vice President Harris, who has since taken the reins and won over the Democratic electorate and officially has been nominated as recently as the Democratic National Convention. Now, this map is my first prediction since the convention. So my prediction from earlier on in August, took place on August 15th, was released.
And mind you, this is a prediction based on the latest models. So
it's about a few days before the convention had taken place. And what we had known historically is that candidates often receive a bump after the convention that takes place for their political party. In 2016, Donald Trump took himself from being below the average and under Hillary Clinton to leading nationwide at the end of July after his convention. Then Hillary Clinton had her convention and she resumed her lead nationwide. In 2020, we saw that both Biden and Trump saw marginal improvements, but still a level of improvement on the national scale when it came down to the conventions. But recently in 2024, we haven't seen much of a bump for either side of the aisle. Back when Trump was faced against Biden, he didn't see much of a convention bump until we saw in the immediate aftermath when Joe Biden dropped out of the race, it pretty much halted any and all of the bumps that we could have seen for former President Trump. And so when Kamala Harris took over as the Democratic nominee, it really went to show that not only did Donald Trump not improve off his margin of victory over Biden, but against Vice President Harris, he was losing to her on the national level. But now we're not really seeing.
I mean, again, we just saw the Ipsos poll come out, and he was at 50 or 46, and she's at 52, and that pushed it outside the margin of error. So, like, this is the kind of stuff that I'm getting kind of sick of, where it's like, oh, here's the hopium. Here we go. Oh, well, Kamala's on the right track. Oh, Kamala's actually winning nationally. Oh, but one aggregate poll just said no, so we're just going to sit here and go, I don't know anymore. Are all the polls bullshit?
The level of a convention bump that we saw in 2008 or even 2012.
That was my ankle.
Or arguably even in 2016. It seems as if this election has largely become stagnant since the last time we made a prediction. And although I'll be adjusting some of my ratings today, we are largely in a very similar place when it comes down to the eventual winner of the election, besides the fact that the election in many ways has started to narrow up ever so slightly. And while I do think this election is just going to be decided by a handful of states, we do have to spend time.
You're telling me that there's only a handful of states that actually freaking matter because they swing both ways and people, oh my God, you're telling me that these are the same states that always somehow hold up the entire country and make us all feel like our votes don't matter when you live in, a state that actually has a population?
I'm characterizing what we determine to be safe states. These are all the states right now that I'm characterizing.
Yeah, Iowa. I can't stand the fact that Iowa.
Characterizing either red or blue.
Come on. If you've ever been to Iowa, then you know.
We know no matter what, no matter who the nominee is, no matter what national
You got the Twin
circumstances,
Cities,
these
that's
states
it.
and these districts will undoubtedly go to the Democratic and Republican nominees. Democrats
Oh, sorry, Des Moines.
start out with 181 electoral votes. Republicans start
that's
out
Twin
with just
Cities
a bit
I was
less,
talking about.
which we can characterize on this map here. But regardless, what we find is that
Quad cities. My bad. You guys have the quad cities. I mean, you guys have they're quad villages. Let's be freaking real. I think you have one skyscraper.
the overall electoral map here is very much anyone's game. Right? Historically speaking, we've seen arguments from the left and the right that the Electoral College favors one side of the aisle over the other. But what we've seen in recent years is that genuinely, the Electoral College, while it may benefit Republicans in that they don't need to do as well in the national popular vote in order to win, it's still very much a toss-up strategy and a toss-up game for both sides of the aisle. Looking at our electoral map right now, Republicans start out with roughly 107 safe elections.
Well, yeah, because the Electoral College swings right kind of went out the door with the whole 2020 thing. No, the Electoral College, as messed up as it is still it's there to show like the will of the voter. So like if there's just too many voters saying we want this person, then they can go, oh no, no. And that's what everybody freaked out with the Hillary Clinton thing. But what happened with Biden, it was like too obvious where they were like, but yeah, no, it does. It's absolute BS that some, dipshit in a freaking conference room gets to essentially just say, you know what, these 3,000 people voted this way. Let's go this way.
Electoral votes. Now, this is a bit misleading because there are some states on this map that we know undoubtedly will go to the Republican Party. But in terms of margin, right now are competitive in a way that means Kamala Harris could lose these states better than Joe Biden did. And I know that sounds crazy to say losing a state better, but it means narrowing down the state from what might have been Trump plus 13 to Trump plus 12. Or if it's anywhere between the 5 to 15 point range, meaning it's a pretty solid Republican state, but Donald Trump's only going to win it by 14.5, it still deserves a likely characterization because we try to keep things consistent around here. And so that means states like Kansas. Now we're going to see the introduction of the likely characterization on the map here, Kansas.
Kansas voted on a referendum, and remember how that went. It was an abortion referendum, and that's right, blue wave in Kansas. So
South Carolina.
I keep saying this in some of my videos, but I really do hate how they only focus on the presidential elections. They never look at the midterms or like the trends that are happening in elections, specifically from 2020, because we've had record turnout since then. We had a record turnout during a midterm. That just got wiped under the freaking carpet because the media has, they know that doesn't sell. That's not going to get the clicks. And on top of it, they don't want you being that informed. Oh, Lord, that would mean that they can't scare you.
Carolina, and arguably even Alaska, states that we know the Republican Party, again, more likely than not, going to win these states. And even in extenuating circumstances, it would be difficult to see how some of these go to the Democratic Party. But it would not be 1,000% out of the realm of reality, unlike a state like Wyoming or Utah, which will never go to a Democrat likely for decades to come. So Kansas.
Yeah, maybe they shouldn't have, the same amount of senators as a California, Chicago, or New York anymore. The fact that I'm pretty sure that they have more bison and more cows and cattle than they do people. So
South Carolina, Alaska, likely Republican.
Are we going to let the cows start voting?
States. They also have a couple others. They have states like Iowa and Ohio.
They're letting the cows in. They're letting them moo. Moo means for Kamala, because Kamula.
Iowa. States that historically were more competitive. Obama won them twice. Trump won them twice.
Yeah.
And now we're up in an election where Donald Trump is likely to win them by a very similar margin to that he did back in 2020. What's most interesting, though, is that
Don't worry, I cringed for you.
These states, looking at the history, have often voted with the winner of the Electoral College. Up until 2020, Ohio had voted correctly in almost every single election since its inception as a U.S. state. But now, it is no longer this everlasting bellwether. Many of the swing bellwether counties really lost their streak and track record in 2020, and it will be interesting to see how Ohio and Iowa perform compared to the national.
Oh, gee, weird. It's almost like, I don't know, there's this aging population that held conservative standards for so long, and they kind of shunned their children and that entire generation under them and told them how big of idiots they are and blah, 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 and how, you can't have gay friends and gay, blah, 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 this and culture war that. It's almost like they were like, oh, you know what? Maybe our parents are kind of, backwards and we need to move on from that. And that's kind of, showing in the demographics of, where a red state is now turning purple.
National average, because more likely than not is the state Democrats are not going to win in future elections, which is why I don't even put Kamala Harris within a lean characterization of winning the state, because we know it's a likely red state. Florida is also going to join the bunch as a likely red state as well. This one really shouldn't shock too many people looking at the 2022 election results.
Again, dude, I don't like how he's not mentioning the abortion referendums. He just, that's not calculating, or that's not being added to his calculations. Like, that's so messed up.
Republicans obliterated Democrats in the top ballot and down ballot races. Really strong showing for the Florida GOP.
It's almost chauvinist in a way, because it's like almost just negating like how powerful the women's vote like is.
They've been outpacing Democrats in the state and voter registration.
But we're focusing on white men, guys.
Swaying over minority voters, specifically Hispanic voters in Miami-Dade and Broward County, and all across the state, really. Florida has seen a monumental shift in favor of Republicans, not to mention the hundreds of thousands of new residents that flocked into Florida during the COVID-19 pandemic to escape what we saw as left-wing policy. States with mask mandates, states with where you saw schools closed or virtual or hybrid, different things that Florida simply did not because of Governor Ron DeSantis. Roughly a 90-10 split of those influxing into Florida in what we saw migration within the United States. We saw a 90-10 split, 80-20 split of party registration and voter sentiment.
It's kind of weird how Texas and Florida, still red, and yet isn't that the bastion of immigration where, oh my God, all these Democratic votes are coming?
Those who newly
Oh, never mind. We bust them all up north.
moved into the state. So Florida has been a state that has moved away from the Democratic Party. It'll be interesting to see the margin this cycle, but I do think
God, they believe their own BS. They actually think that these people are coming in to vote, and they they don't know their own laws.
Donald Trump wins it by a likely margin. And so to now get back up into where, actually we have one more thing to characterize as a likely red state, or not even state, but district, Maine's 2nd district right now, which I would say is likely red. Donald Trump won it by double digits before. He will likely get very close again in 2024. Could be 9 points, could be 10, could be 11. Overall, I'm saying it's more than 5. So there we have it. All of the likely and safe Republican states. And now you can start to see why Democrats are coming into this election hoping that they have a few more states that they can help build themselves up to 270 before they really have to get down to the very, very narrow 7 states that truly do determine the outcome of this election. This includes states like Virginia and Colorado, New Mexico, all states that Biden won in the last election by 10 points plus, meaning Democrats have a lot of room to fall. New data out of Nebraska 2nd from Survey USA shows Kamala Harris up 6 points in this district, 5 points in this district rather, 52 to 47, something similar, large amount. Kamala Harris is doing well in Nebraska 2nd. This is a district that actually was
I was about to say, is Wisconsin going to, how about the states that Joe Biden won? How come, again, at this point, I am getting a little pissy, I understand. But he keeps doing this where, look, he keeps shading these light red, right? Then we got light blue, right? I'm hoping that he gets to it. And I know that I'm interrupting a little bit, but I'm seeing, again, this is all speculative on his part, but, dude, if he doesn't color Wisconsin blue, like light blue even, then we're just lying.
Gerrymandered to be more Republican than it was in 2020 when it voted for Biden by over 5 this time. Likely to do so as well. Nebraska 2nd has seen a
Oh, cool. Gerrymandering just, yeah, that's
massive leftward trend. I would not be shocked if by the end of this decade, Nebraska 2nd ends up being
Can we start you know what? No, we got to start playing the game. We got to start gerrymandering districts the other way. We got to start moving these assholes where it's just like, oh, hey, farmers, hey, there's only 4 of you. Cool. You get all that land, but the rest of us, we're going to gerrymander this district over here so all of us are included on this side, and you guys don't count anymore. Again, that's just fair's fair. Fuck, dude.
Double-digit Democratic district in future elections. So right now, that one electoral vote goes to Kamala Harris, but she has her own set of 2 more states that are characterized, 3 more states rather, that should be characterized as likely blue. To no surprise to really anyone, Maine at large would be characterized as such. But what I'm more focused on are Minnesota and New Hampshire, states where Democrats, again, did very well back in 2020, largely with Biden. Hillary Clinton held on to both of these states in 2016, which did in fact see massive shifts to the Republicans. But it is these 2 states that have really rejected Donald Trump twice, and it is also Minnesota, where Governor Tim Walz is a very popular governor and adds a lot.
I'll be honest, this is the kind of stuff like that I don't want to cover as much, because polling data is just... It's like beating your head against a wall, because we go back to 2016. How much did any of that matter?
Kamala Harris is taking not only in Minnesota, but across the Rust Belt.
But
These
right
are 2
now,
states that
this is just like how we feel better, right?
I would say, with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, become likely Democratic states. And so that brings...
Whether you're Republican or Democrat, because you know that Republicans are looking at the new poll that came out from Ipsos, and they're just like, it's rigged. Because... you know how that goes. Anytime that they're winning something, they're so happy to just be like, oh, look at this poll. This poll is totally right. Totally. Oh, my God. This is like the most reputable pollster ever, and then the next week that same pollster will be like, actually it's swung in. Fake news.
Brings us down to 133 toss-up electoral votes. And so what this really means from here on out is that I expect the margin of victory for either side of the aisle to be less than 5 points in.
How come How come we have Nebraska broken up like this, but we don't have Georgia with or Arizona where Maricopa County, and then Georgia where Atlanta is? Like, if we're gonna pull that crap with Nebraska, like, what's going on here? And it's Nebraska. What are you doing in Nebraska? What the hell?
In these states. Now, you might be shocked to see Texas on this map, and I will say, if I was to show myself this map when I first started creating videos on this channel in 2017, I would have thought you were crazy. But Texas has taken
Wow, you've been doing this since 2017? Jeez, dude.
a turn in favor of the Democratic Party that really means Texas is far closer than we otherwise think. Let's look at it from the perspective of historical elections. Back in 2012, Mitt Romney won the state by 16 points. Now, 8 years prior, we had seen a reduction. George W. Bush won the state by 23. But 8 years later, Mitt Romney was still winning by 16 points. Barack Obama had just 41% of the vote.
Oh, man. I'll never forget that September. The radio shows were freaking out. People were already saying, bye, Obama, you are a one-term president, blah, blah, blah. I was listening to O&A, Opie and Anthony, if you don't know who they are. Anthony, he was the more conservative. He's actually the reason that the show kind of got canceled, essentially. I mean, they split up after a long time. They hated each other, but the whole thing just happened where it was like, yeah, whatever. He pulled some racist crap, got fired for it, and then, had to blame his boss because I can't say anything anymore. But he was literally recording a black woman on the street and being racist. But he was assaulted, man. It's not like he provoked anything. I don't know where I was going with that outside of just the fact that, yeah, it's the same freaking language.
To put things into context, states like Missouri and Indiana and South.
Oh, that's where I was going with it. Yeah, and that's what they were saying about Barack Obama. They're like, this election's over. Prepare for Romney.
Carolina and Alaska and Mississippi and Montana were all closer than Texas was in the 2012 election. Then came 2016, and this is where it really matters. In 2016, we saw Texas, out of all of the states, shift almost the most. Out of any state, Arizona was up there, California was up there, Utah was massive, but that was because of a third-party involvement in the state. Texas, though, massive, massive improvement for Hillary Clinton, 6.8% shift when everywhere else was shifting to the right. Iowa shifted 15 points, Ohio shifted 11 points, Michigan shifted 10 points, Pennsylvania 6, Wisconsin 8. Texas, though, complete opposite direction. Then, in 2016, compared to 2020, Texas shifted 3 points to the right. What happened in 2020, well, I'm sure you might remember if you looked at the results, Trump only won the state by 5.6. What was 15.8 to 9 to 5.6, I do believe.
Seeing that graph change as much as it just did, I do always forget that the majority of this country registers as independent.
At this point, we are on track for Texas to be a lean.
I mean, hell, I was a registered independent up until Bernie.
Republican state. Massive one for the GOP, and I don't think Democrats will contest it. But I think we're on track for a lean GOP characterization, and I think with Donald Trump at the top of the ticket, that's where we are. Now,
that's
down
crazy.
To the 90.
Look how light Texas is.
3 toss-up electoral votes, 7 battleground states to determine on: Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. Now, if you live in any of these states, I will say I feel bad for you. There have been over a combined $500 billion across these 7 battleground states slated in advertisement spending.
Any election cycle, if you live in any of these states, it's got to be exhausting because, as a country, we could all kind of feel, oh yeah, the election cycle is definitely bad, but when every news station's just saying, oh, these 5 states, and then anytime you meet somebody from that state, you're just like, dude!
From Democrats and Republicans through November after Labor Day, which is tomorrow, which means you are going to see the airways completely taken over by advertisement after advertisement after advertisement, and that's because it is these 7 battleground states that will,
for how many people are still watching television?
Will determine the future of this nation, the future of the Democratic and Republican parties, a very, very interesting election, a very, very important one in these 7 states. And so coming into them, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have 219 electoral votes. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have 226. Now let's start out where the Trump team really has some of their stronger performances and where I think they are going to do the best in out of these 7 states. To start off, I would go to a state like North Carolina, where we saw Donald Trump and Mike Pence in 2020 win the state by roughly a point and won it by 3 in 2016. This is a state where Democrats, if tapped in and correctly doing it, would be able to win North Carolina. I don't know if that's this election cycle. I do think that because the Biden campaign had been very focused on North Carolina for quite some time, the infrastructure absolutely exists for a strong Democratic performance, but getting over...
Notice how he hasn't mentioned abortion once.
Over that hurdle, I would honestly compare
Not
North Carolina to that
once.
of the Republican parties in Nevada. And
You, if you're gonna cover elections and not mention they keep saying the economy and the border are the two main issues. Yeah, keep gaslighting us.
that historically, they've had strong showings. But
Uh-huh.
competitive races
I can tell you right now, I know some women in my life that ain't the main issue, but they're also not responding to polls.
that almost always end up with one party winning.
I did though. I got pulled this week.
For Republicans in Nevada, it's Democrats winning the close and competitive races. For Democrats in North Carolina, it's Republicans winning those close and competitive races. And I do think at this point, we aren't on track for a 2008 style victory. As much as the energy might feel like it on the Democratic side, Republicans are just as energized. And Donald Trump and J.D. Vance at 235 electoral votes with North Carolina.
Yeah, that's something else that's not being mentioned is how much energy there is behind this campaign, even for it just starting.
It isn't really the end of their electoral story, but it does go to show that some of the states that were the weakest links for Kamala Harris, if they were to even be considered links at all, would still remain in the Donald Trump column today. But this can be countered. The 16 electoral votes in North Carolina can absolutely be countered in a state like Michigan, where I think Kamala Harris is going to win by a lean margin. This means anywhere between 1% to 5%. Tilt means less than 1%. Michigan, I think, is going to be very competitive. I still believe that Kamala Harris has seen some bleeding relative to Biden's performance in 2020 and arguably even Hillary Clinton's in 2016, and the respective to the Arab American communities, the Muslim community in states like Michigan, where it really, really matters.
Again, women and abortion. I love how you can go to the Palestine issue, but we're not going to talk about abortion.
You're talking about Dearborn in Detroit, where Democrats are consistently relying on voting bases across.
And fine. Yeah, let's not vote, and let's just let the guy who said he wants mass deportations, because you're not in there.
The states that in a combined force can.
You know that if you have brown skin, you're the first ones to go. He's not going to focus on your freaking Polish neighbors.
Elect Democrats
Come
across
on.
Michigan.
Be fucking real.
Right now, Democrats aren't doing so well. Even though Joe Biden was far more unpopular than that of Vice President Harris, at the end of the day, things are very difficult for Democrats in a state like Michigan. I do think that Gretchen Whitmer laid out a very good blueprint for the Democratic Party as to how to win without consistently winning in the same way that Biden did amongst the same core.
It's kind of weird. I watched this other guy talking about Michigan, I think just 2 days ago, and he had that solidly blue. So now I'm starting to even question this guy's predictions. I liked this guy's channel because he was just giving you the election news. This is the first time that I've seen his speculation, and I can honestly say that he's kind of off.
Gretchen Whitmer did see some reversions in minority support across the.
I would love to go back and see what this guy. Oh, he's started in 2017 though, so we couldn't see the good one.
Board in Michigan, but she ran up the numbers amongst white suburban voters. And believe it or not, what we have found is that in a winning coalition, like a state like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, voting bases can actually sometimes be, counteracted. In one end, we saw Nevada in 2020 as a perfect example, how Donald Trump made massive gains across the country, not massive, but in context, I would say larger than normal gains for a Republican candidate amongst minority voters and specifically Latino voters. In a state like Nevada, we did see that. But what it was counteracted by in terms of the overall margin shift was a victory amongst white voters that was larger, or even in some cases, a better loss than it was in years prior. And so I think Michigan's a very similar example, where I think Kamala Harris will largely perform roughly even with that of Biden in 2020. And while it may not be a slam dunk victory the Democrats were hoping for, it's still a victory. And it's 15 electoral votes at Kamala.
I'm getting sick of repeating it, but what about the women?
Kamala Harris can add to her name. Clearly, there is work to be done. But right now, I don't think it spells out an immediate loss for Kamala Harris. I still believe she's more likely to win Michigan than not, but it's a lot closer than Democrats would like it to be. So that brings us down to 62 toss-up electoral votes.
I can't wait till October hits and they just make, that's when I know that the Harris campaign is going to pull that as its trump card, where it's going to be, remember what he did?
Again,
Nevada. Remember how he put these people in office and then took rights away from you? Yeah, that's a real thing.
Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia.
Also, they got to start hammering the facts that the economy is the way it is because of what he did.
Now, I think
the bills he signed.
Trump has really gone on to show that he knows how to win in some of these states in 2016 and 2020. Started to see that a little bit walked back. But I do think right now, Kamala Harris is not the favorite in a state like Georgia. My last prediction was the same in Georgia and North Carolina. They both had tilt red characterizations, and I want to continue to defend this point. Because while the energy is there for Democrats, and they absolutely are contesting the state in a way the Democrats haven't in the past 30 years, that doesn't mean that Georgia is going to go blue, right? 2022, I think, was a wake.
Yeah, again, though, I'm a little confused as to why this little subsection of Nebraska can be counted, but not Maricopa, fucking whatever. God, it was all over the news. DeKalb County. I don't understand why that doesn't have its own little subsection here, especially when it's like. Oh, sorry about that. I forgot what I was even saying there. Let's continue.
Wake-up call for many Democrats in Georgia, in that while they were expecting Herschel Walker to lose, and maybe some of them thought he was going to win because of the red wave rhetoric, but after the 2022 midterms, they were hoping that by the time we had reached runoff date, Herschel Walker would have lost by 5-6 points in the same way Blake Masters did, in the same way Dr. Roz did, but it didn't happen. And it didn't happen because Georgia is a state that's very difficult
Oh, that's right. Radical leftist Raphael Warnock.
for Democrats to crack. They did it.
And that's right. They have 2 Democratic senators. So it's just so, like, just because I don't like the information I'm getting isn't the reason that I'm getting upset. The reason I'm getting upset is because this doesn't really show you how it went in the last election. And, like, this is some doomer shit. I mean, great. Get us motivated. Like, get us scared because we need to hit those, those ballot boxes. But holy crap.
It once in 2020, and I think they can do it again in 2024. But as of right now, Donald Trump is the very narrow favorite. Now, moving on by this state, Kamala Harris has been performing surprisingly well in a state like Wisconsin. I think it could be a state that actually votes to the left of Pennsylvania. Wisconsin is a state that has historically been very difficult for Democrats as well.
Honestly, like, I'm getting kind of sick of this where it's always the uphill battle. It's always the uphill battle.
2000 and 2004, they were decided by less than a point.
Sick of
It was only 2008 and 2012 with Obama's.
At what point do we just go, yeah, except national polling on, like, the actual issues and the economy and things like that do show, like, people really are doing pretty well, but they think they're not.
Very broadly winning coalition.
That just came out. The latest reports on the economy is showing literally people going, I'm doing well, but I don't think the economy is doing well. Why is that?
Democrats were able to run up the numbers in Wisconsin. But beyond that, it has been a competitive state. But Kamala Harris's performances in the state have actually seen major improvements compared to that of President Biden, and major improvements compared to many of the other battleground states. Wisconsin and Michigan right now, I'd say, are lean blue. Democrats, I also do think, maintain this narrow upper hand in the state of Arizona. But it is a narrow upper hand, largely driven by the abortion referendum that was just confirmed and certified to be on the ballot this November.
Thank you. At least you got one in there.
And largely driven by the...
Holy crap, you missed Florida. I think there's a few other states there that you might have missed there, Gay.
down ballot benefit for Democrats that Ruben Gallego and many House Democrats now see them.
Although the Ohio one, because the abortion issue's already been relegated or whatever, fucking... Yeah, I have a feeling that is the reason that one's still even red.
Themselves doing far better and outpacing Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket. In some cases, marginally outperforming Kamala Harris at the same rate. I would say not marginally, at the same rate to that of President Biden, but she does better than Biden. And so the numbers sort of elevate on all the scales for Democrats. But Arizona right now, I'd say arguably, is a Democratic victory. And so that brings us to 262 electoral votes, 25 electoral votes to go, 251 for Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Right now, I think based on a few more data points we've seen out of the state of Nevada, Donald Trump now surges back to be the upper hand candidate in the state of Nevada. It's 6 electoral votes, and it's nothing that Democrats should look at and say, this isn't worth pursuing, but it also isn't worth looking at and saying, if we don't win Nevada, we don't win the election. Well, Nevada's had a long history of voting blue. Since the 2004 election, that was the last time Republicans won it, Democrats have done quite well in the state. But it is clear that that advantage is diminishing, not necessarily quickly, but over time. And in some race, it has to budge. It was the governorship in 2022 that was coinciding with the Senate race where Kathy Cortez Masto, though able to hold out the polls that said the Republicans were going to win, only won by less than a point. I do think Kamala Harris has a strong regional advantage in Nevada and knows how to win in states like Nevada and knows how to win over voters like those in Nevada. At the same time, on a more nationalized scale, I think Nevada becomes a bit more tricky for national Democrats, including Vice President Harris. I think in 2 weeks' time, Kamala Harris could be up in the state. But the data points I've seen over the past 2 weeks aren't exactly that promising, especially in a post-convention bump circumstance that doesn't seem to be phasing out to be reality. However, Nevada and Arizona considered, I still believe Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are the favorites in Pennsylvania. I think the margins will be close in the state, even closer than it was 2 weeks ago. But that doesn't mean Democrats lose. Pennsylvania is a state that if Democrats win it, they more likely than not win the election. The odds we've seen on major forecast websites is that roughly if Trump wins Pennsylvania,
major forecast websites, major betting websites, you guys are using sports betting as, your metrics here. So I don't. It's kind of funny how that changed, but that's the one I trust that more because, yeah, you think people are gonna vote. I've said this before. I think that a lot of people that are Trump supporters are still going to bet against Donald Trump specifically because they don't want to lose the money, but they know that they could totally lose the election.
He has a 94% chance of winning. If Kamala Harris wins Pennsylvania, she has a 91% chance of winning. Pennsylvania is a state that really does dictate all. It's a large electoral vote sum. It's a state that's very much an indicator of the rest of the nation, and it serves as this litmus test for Democrats not only on the national level, but in the Rust Belt regional level. Which is why I think if Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are doing well in Wisconsin and Michigan, as they have all three voted together in every election since 1992, they very well will do so again in this election.
I'm surprised Maine's not later.
And so I think Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin join forces. Lock rank Arizona joins the Democratic column compared to where it was and gets Biden. But overall, Democrats lose Georgia and Nevada, ultimately bringing Donald Trump to 257 electoral votes, a minor improvement off of my last map, and Kamala Harris at 281, a minor loss compared to the last map. Overall, though, still a victory for the vice president, and good numbers, I should say, in comparison to that of President Biden.
Okay, great. I mean, this video just reminded me how much I do hate the election maps, and I hate like gerrymandering, and I do hate how blatant some of the corruption is that we're just staring at, where it's just like, oh, you mean that Republicans, they got power over this little area, and then they decided, oh, we have too many blue voters, move them over here. That happened to me. That literally happened to me. I am now redistrict because we went too blue, which I think that needs to be addressed. I think that I would love to file a lawsuit against them to have that addressed, but I don't have that kind of money, and I'm also not an attorney. I'm just a stoner in a basement talking politics. So, well, that was the update. I hope that you it was kind of, it was boring, let's be honest, but this is what elections are. They're not exactly the most exciting thing. However, if you enjoyed watching me get a little riled up and upset, then come on back to watch me some more. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, but I do sincerely appreciate you checking me out, and I'll see you in the next one.